Hello? Okay. It's interesting. It lights red when it's working, which is very unnatural. Okay. If I may ask, just take a seat and try to sit up front. There should be more people coming, but it's... So anyway, let's start. My name is Ali Aouni. I'm with the Gerhardt Center, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Resilient Urban Communities Conference. The Resilient Urban Community is a project between Münster University, Germany, Wits Saarland University, CAPSI, Center of African Philanthropy and Social Investment, University of Strathmore, Kenya, and Gerhardt Center, AUC. Every year we meet, and when we meet, there are a big chunk of our activities around PhD seminars, workshops, and it's sort of a discussion of the PhD dissertations. And the last day, which is like today, we always have a general conference. Now, when you talk about the concept of resilience, or resilient, typically resilience, and I'm going to tell you the definition from the typical Webster definition. Resilient means able to withstand and recover quickly from difficult conditions, shocks, without permanent damage. Now, when you talk about resilient communities, it's a similar thing. We tend to associate resilience with individual attributes, which is to a large extent, it is correct. You talk about perseverance, you talk about sturdy, resilient, flexible. But it's really becomes more stronger when we talk about it as a community. This is the sustained ability of a community with available resources, which is typically limited to respond and withstand and recover from adverse situations. There is an aspect of it of adaptation, but there is another aspect which is a mitigation. And thus, when you think about resilience, don't assume you can just sort of recover it right away. This is like buying an insurance, right? You buy an insurance ahead of time. The amount of insurance you buy ahead of time. You don't buy insurance when you hit your car, right? So it's something that is very strategic, that is very cultural, and it takes a long time to sort of develop. When you talk about adaptation, you talk about mitigation, you also talk about food security. This is the core in the process. I want to just to sort of alert you that when you talk about the strength of a system or the strength of a chain, it depends on the strength of the weakest component or weakest link. That's why when you talk about resilient communities, this is not something that you target the elitist. You really have to think in terms of a base of a pyramid. You really have to think about grassroots. You really have to think about the community, and not communities dwelling in Tajammu al-Khamis. We're talking about communities living in informal settlements. That's like everywhere. Now, when you look at the schedule, we start with Her Excellency, Dr. Layla Skander. Layla Skander is an former Minister of State for Urban Renewal and Informal Settlements, and she was also the Minister of Environment. And we're very proud to have her on the board of the Gerhardt Center. You probably remember we went to Tawasul, we told her we just came from APE, and she said, Layla Skander. We all learned from Layla Skander. So in Egypt, she's really a legend when you talk about sustainability. And then we were supposed to have Yusuf Nassif. Unfortunately, he had a stomach bug, and I was informed about that in the morning, 6:30. Now, interesting, we talk about resilience as a community attribute, it's a network attribute. I was able to I sent messages to many people, and then I got a response from Mohsen Sarhan, who is the head of the Egyptian Food Bank. So Mohsen is going to come and talk with us. But part of the resilience is food security, right? And Mohsen is not just going to talk about feeding, because they have lots of projects around producing communities, producing farms, inclusive supply chains. And he's going to talk about this because it's very interesting. Then we have a lunch break. Then there is a session about the African-German dialogue, and we get representatives from the German embassy, the Friedrich Ebert, the Goethas, etc. And they'll talk about their activities in Egypt and in Africa. After a coffee break, we'll have resilient urban communities, insights, and findings, which is just going to brief you about the project. The project is going for 2 years. There are lots of interesting insights. The focus has been on Johannesburg, but still the lessons are applicable everywhere. So they will brief us about it. In the afternoon, we have urban and community resilience. Our own Dr. Nohal Mikawi, who is the Dean of the School of Global Administration and Public Policy, and she's going to moderate. She has two really down-to-earth, community-level urbanists working. The first one is Dr. May Al-Ibrashi. May Al-Ibrashi has an initiative called Al-Athar Lana, which means the site is ours. The major thing there is that when you're renovating a site, you also have to worry about the people living around it. You cannot just sort of renovate a big mosque, a big church, whatever. You really have to think about the people around it, which is very atypical in most developing countries. If you respect the site, you would probably ignore the people living around. The other one is Yasmina, which some of us have seen her a few days back, and she has something called Tawasul, and she's working in Ezbet Khirallah, which is one of the informal settlements in Egypt. And she does marvelous work. You will see you saw some videos. I mean, people who are dwellers of an informal settlements doing acrobats and singing in a choral, which is a very interesting way to sort of revive and put back positive spirit in a community. So again, remember, it's about the community. Now, without much ado, I want to pass the floor to Dr. Laila, and she's going to talk about adaptation, resilience, and
Okay, how are you?
Zainab, can you help us, please?
It's up. Thank you, Dr. Ali, and thank you for coming, everybody. It's a real delight. I don't ever drive to Fifth Settlement, but AUC and this crowd is really special. So thank you for hosting me. And thank you for what you said about what you saw yesterday at APE, at the Association for the Protection of the Environment, because this is one of my lifelong endeavors. So what I will talk about today with you is this dilemma. How do you govern a city with all of the city needs? Now pretend you are the governor of Cairo or Nairobi or whichever big city in the world. You have to address millions of urban issues. You make sure there's housing, that the water is available for people, sanitation, the sewage isn't overflowing, public transport, traffic, security, public health, and so on. Millions of things. I cannot talk about all of this today. I'm going to talk about two. Waste management, as it relates to public health and the environment, and housing. So, one of the things you have to do as a governor or a municipal head is to make sure that the garbage is picked up every day and taken somewhere where it is processed, handled, all right? Now, we all know that our cities are growing exponentially. Urbanization is increasing all over Africa, in the world indeed. And therefore, as a city governor, I have to make sure that waste is managed, because if I don't do that, we're going to have rats and cholera and all sorts of diseases. So I have to take care of garbage because it is a public health issue as a governor of the city. However, there's another phase to this governance of the city. People, very resilient people, have made it their realm of livelihoods, as you saw in Menshit Nasser if you were there yesterday. All over the world, in emerging markets, garbage is not a public health issue. It is a livelihoods issue, it's a materials economy, it's a value chain story, it is a source of income to educate my children, to feed them, to address health emergencies, and so on. And most importantly, to build a house. And the house I'm going to build will most probably be an informal house on land that me and other people have acquired. They call it illegally. I have a problem with that word. And that's where we set up our industry, our enterprises. So it's not about public health. So you have this dichotomy. I'm a mayor. I need to keep the city clean to keep people healthy. But I'm a recycler, usually in the informal sector. I'm not concerned about public health. I'm concerned about food, housing, money, business, okay? How do you, therefore, govern these two aspects in one city with each one perceiving the issue in a different way? So this has led to us saying, wow, how come cities in the South can do that? Let me tell you that it is not a story about Cairo. This is a story about the global South. This is a story of Kalicha, Western Cape, South Africa. This is one of my very close places to my heart. I have been there about 6 times. And in the 90s, the Ford Foundation actually sent a delegation from the garbage collectors neighborhood in Mansheit Nasser. They sent 6 garbage collectors, between parentheses, recyclers, to Kalicha to show them how we recycle. On the way, they stopped somewhere else. They stopped in Kibera, in Kenya. And there, they too showed them how we recycle. This was in the early 90s, when the whole informal sector recycling sector in Africa was still nascent, but we were so advanced because we began 80 years ago in Cairo. So who lives in these neighborhoods? Well, this is Mumbai, Dharavi, another major informal settlement. Who lives there? Whether it's Dharavi or Kibera or Kalicha, the people who live there are the engines of the city. They're teachers, nurses, bus drivers, cooks, hospitality people, they're air stewardesses. I once met one who was from one of the informal settlements. They're the people who drive the city. So now I am the governor of the city of Cairo. I need to make it work. I need to make sure all these people get to work. So when I do my urban planning, do I try to move them out of the city? At present, this is the current paradigm of urban upgrading for informal settlements. And the people who do that do not look at it with a closer lens of, boy, if I move all these people out, how is the city going to function? Because I'm going to have millions of teachers and nurses and bus drivers who will not be able to get to work, or will increase the carbon footprint of the city because there isn't adequate public housing, transport. So you end up having a city that's trying to govern itself and improve the situation for everybody. But in fact, their attempts to do that intersect with what the informal sector is doing on many fronts. What do they do? Well, they provide a very low-cost service. I promise you, we're not paying what it costs to have our waste removed. It provides jobs for very, very poor people and who are not skilled because we left them behind and we did not send them to good schools. It provides enterprises. You should spend a day with one of these people and see the cutthroat competition and how they understand markets and money. It provides, for me, the housing angle, housing, enormous financing. One day, we did a calculation in Mansheit Nasser, and there are 6 neighborhoods. The biggest housing project in this country was financed by our garbage. But of course, a lot of things have to happen to it before it can become money. And to do that, they have to invest in trucks, machines, trading networks, stockpiling, warehouses, and so in doing that, they become the feedstock for a very essential formal business. In Egypt, we have 200 plastics, only plastic recycling factories, formal, registered, they pay taxes, abide by labor laws, blah, blah. They would die tomorrow morning if the masses of humanity of the informal sector who do the collection, transport, sorting, processing, compacting, transporting, did not do what they do. So, let's say I'm the investment minister and I'm trying to govern. Do I know about the importance of the resilience these people are providing me for the formal sector people I'm representing? I doubt it. I don't think it's always very visible. Now, all these issues of low cost, of cleaning services, jobs for the poor, enterprises, financing, all of these things in the North are provided by government, by public policy, by investment policy, by someone who wears a suit, has gone to college, and doesn't have to worry about his next meal. But in the South, it's the reverse. It's the informal sector that is doing all of that. They are providing all of the list of things up there. So how do they do it? Over the years, they test methods of governance. How do we acquire land? Never mind about the legality, but they know where and when and how, and they trade land without contracts. So for the government, this is a major black spot in their record. They hate them because they have acquired government land without paying for it. Granted, but why did they do that? Did they find affordable housing and reject it? Big question mark. Affordable housing is not readily available in our mega cities in the South. Did they find financing sources that give ample credit without collateral? I doubt it. Did they find someone to teach them how to operate machines? I doubt it. All of our TVET programs are way removed from the reality of the industry of the poor in general. Did they have lawyers or public prosecutors to teach them about contracts, about fraud, about credit ratings? Nothing. Okay, so what? They did it themselves. And they have their own governance structures. And they survive, just like Dr. Ali defined, by bouncing back every time. I'll give you an example. In one of the recycling neighborhoods in Cairo, Manshiet Nasser, these people there were evicted 5 times. They came to the city in the 40s, and they were evicted 5 times. Wow. And now they are the largest recycling neighborhood in the world. How did they bounce back? They institute their own rules, their own ways of buying and selling land, their own ways of financing. They negotiate the width of the street. They negotiate water cuts, power cuts, evasion of taxes. They negotiate everything, and they design their own governance structures. But more importantly, they circumvent official housing programs, and because there is no affordable housing available, they create their own housing developments. It starts out with 1 floor, and then they build incrementally. They don't provide millions of pounds to do a big building. Every time they need a room, marry off a son, have a little extra money, they add incrementally. Now, when I was Minister of Informal Settlements, there is no way under the sun that this could have been accepted. You cannot, as a formal public policy official, say, I'm going to upgrade informal settlements and build incrementally. To be fair, not just because urban planners are so predisposed, the public, it was the public who pressures public officials say, hey, you're sitting in a minister's seat, get off your, and do something. We want to see good neighborhoods. We don't want to see these ramshackle buildings all over Cairo. You've been in office for a year and it's still as bad as it was. Move, do something, you know? So just to be fair about the pressure on public officials to govern, while others are governing in their own way, but incrementally. So they move on to the poor, our urban poor, who are the majority of urban people, by the way. They move on to the land of the city on the periphery, they subdivide it, they build, and pretty soon it becomes a neighborhood with grocery stores and fawari shops and cafes and so on. As they do that incrementally, there are a lot of power negotiations that happen among them, just like a cabinet of ministers. And so they establish their own rules and regulations and their own power structures. And because of that, they overcome horrendous problems that they face every day. Just traffic, huge trucks driving in and out, someone double parking on one of these tiny alleys. They negotiate it, and if it cannot be resolved on the spot, they know who to call. They know who the big honcho is, the prime minister of the place, and he comes in and mediates, or if there are even worse problems than just traffic. So they have proven their worth, whether it's Kalicha, whether it's Kibera, whether it is Mumbai, whether it is Mansheit Nasser, that they now have a very important role to play in the governance of the city, not just because of the recycling or of the enterprises, but because of the social value they provide. Now, let me give you a very important overview of what I'm talking about. The map on the left there shows you 6 dots. These are 6 neighborhoods that started out as shacks. Over 70 years, they have become neighborhoods. Everything I just spoke about, how it started with a little shack and then they built it, they're neighborhoods with all of the items and features of a neighborhood, okay? And the big problem for us in government is, what do we do about these? Now, if we move them out of the city, we're going to make the distance from where they collect our waste longer. More cost for trucks and transport, more time, and probably less regular collection service. How is that going to impact the health of the city? It will be a disaster. So here's the dilemma. We hate having them here because now they're in the heart of the city, and we need to upgrade. We want to modernize and look posh and all of the rest of it. But if we do that, we're going to place the rest of the city at huge health risk. So then the tug of war. Where do we find the land? How do we move them? How do we transport? How do we do the transfer stations? How do we evict them? How do we eliminate them? How do we replace them? Huge governance issues that up till today have not been resolved in the South, in all of Africa, okay? And the debate is ongoing. Now, I'll give you a micro picture of that neighborhood, just one of them, Mansheit Nasser, the largest one where there are about 100,000 recyclers. The people who live there collect, transport, sort, and enterprise. All the dots you see there, different colors, represent the different enterprises. Now, when did that start? In 1983. How? Oxfam brought in 3 machines, a compactor and a granulator, and that's it. 3 machines were financed by donors. The rest was all self-financed. They saw the money to be made in it, and that's it. They didn't need to go to a TVET school, they didn't need to go to a bank, they didn't need to go to training on solid waste management. They did it because they saw the money in it. And they turned from collectors going to our homes every day picking up from our doorstep, to businessmen operating machines. And there they learned at the machine. Granted, there were fingers flying and accidents and the rest of it, but it happened, okay? Today, in this one neighborhood, we have 1,500 enterprises. And just to show you how the 2 issues connect, waste and housing, which is what I'm trying to focus on here, this is what it looks like. Imagine, I want you every day now, every time you toss things into your can, if you live in Cairo, I'm not talking about anywhere else, your garbage is the bank that finances housing in informal settlements for our recyclers. Over 70 years, our trash has been turned into money that has built incrementally this huge housing project in 6 neighborhoods, and that's happened all over Africa. So these small and medium enterprises, I mean, the ingenuity, I don't know if you can see them, there's a forklift lifting a big bag because it has plastic and because it's going to go on the roof and be spread out to be dried by solar energy, the sun. So Here they are being ingenious. What does it do? In addition to supporting housing, the enterprises, the investments, the employment, the livelihoods, the industry, can we call it a green economy? When we try to do that, people in the formal sector laugh at us. This is dirty, it's disgusting, it's not organized. It is actually, it's highly organized, but you have to see it and know it. And that's what the formal governance crowd doesn't see up till today. So this is how low-income people in emerging markets live. They recycle, provide what we call green jobs, family-owned businesses, income, housing, education, and value for the country and families. It starts with the truck that comes to your house. It goes to the neighborhood where it's sorted. Then it is separated into different types. Everybody knows who to sell to, where, how much. And this is how resilient they are. They know all these things. These are business aspects of the green economy, but practiced by the people who live in informal settlements. And they solve all of their issues as they carry on. They had to lobby for public schools, but until public schools came in 1983, they had non-formal schools, and they did teach their kids to read and write and a little more. And there were NGOs. You visited one maybe yesterday in Tawassul. Yasmin Abu Yusuf will tell you about a different neighborhood. They provided people with learning. Maybe not formal, but it was there. At least they did something. So these are the types of investments. This compactor, back in 1983, was installed by Oxfam. Today, they all buy it. It costs 150,000 pounds. They have to save a lot of money, but they don't save it in banks, unfortunately. They save it in gold or just in cash until they're ready to go purchase. Not only that, they actually manufacture these machines now in their neighborhoods. And it goes all the way through processing and final products like hangers, ice cream spoons, and the rest of it. So the employment aspect of their resilience is very important. Let me show you the job creation. I mean, I told you about housing. The biggest housing project in the city was financed by waste. Well, guess what? We have millions of donor projects and government programs to alleviate poverty, to generate employment. But you know what? This was done by them on their own, without government, without donors. How? You have 3 to 4 people who collect, 4 women sort. I'm talking about every ton of waste. The city generates 20,000 tons of household waste every day, and commercial. Then you have thousands more who are moving the materials through the chain, 15,000 recycling enterprises, 7 direct and 10 indirect jobs. So let's say they collect 15,000 of the 20, multiply by the 17, they've generated 255,000 jobs. I have worked a lot in donor-funded projects and in government to generate employment. Nothing like this, nothing, okay? Is that resilience or not? I don't know. Anyway, so then to carry on, why are they important? Is it just because they alleviate poverty and provide jobs and no, because the value chain they have created is so essential to our formal industry. If they stopped, our industry would crash. Seriously, I know all the big wigs in the manufacturing formal industry, and when they have a shortage of feedstock for their plants, they come to me and say, we don't like the way in negotiations this guy is doing. You know him, go talk to him, blah, blah, blah. They have real issues if the value chain is disrupted. Now, we have been surveying these people for years, and we have been documenting the growth of the sector, the growth of employment, the growth of income, and the growth of investment. And believe me, over the past 40 years, it has been growing at a rate of 40% every year. Now show me any other business that grows at that rate. And believe it or not, it's now it's now going into a different area we never dreamed of, ever. The recovered materials in 2023, today, are worth so much more money than other rural activities. Take the Nile. This is here in Zamalek in Beba. And these barges are carrying huge sacks of plastic. It's not a transport thing, barge. It's plastic that was recovered from the Nile. Today, fishermen are making more money fishing plastics out of the Nile than fish. Sad statement about the environment, but that's the importance and the resilience of people. They are a community. They live on the Nile, all these fishermen. And they've discovered that, okay, not enough fish because of the pollution. Maybe plastic will be an alternative. They've not abandoned the fishing, but there they are. So it's not just about the 6 neighborhoods, it's about the whole South. Because the value chain I showed you is only a small fraction of the real story. The real story is much bigger. This, you can see this kind of picture in Ena, in Asyut, in the Delta, all over the country. Extremely poor people have learned how to get hold of materials, even if they have to scavenge, but they know that they have to amass volume, and they know where to store, and they know how long to wait, and they know who to sell to, and they know how to figure out the whole business model. From extreme poverty business modeling, all the way to huge investments to machinery, capital, trading networks, formal sector connections, the whole story I just told you. So I consider this immense resilience of the poor who have learned how to manage materials. And it's not just about keeping the city clean and public health anymore. Khalas, that's passé. Now the focus is on the climate, because the debate around global warming now revolves around the materials economy and how we have to stop extracting fossil fuels. Well, plastic is oil and gas. You want to stop extracting oil and gas for cars, yes, but also for these consumable goods that are trashed in a bin somewhere and either left to burn in an uncontrolled dump site, that's what happens in the South mostly, or put in a landfill where the gas is not extracted, where it's poorly managed and still emits horrors, including methane and other things. So now the dilemma, the climate debate, it's not longer about